I'm really going to go through just a little bit of the theory around customer centricity. How I tend to work is I'm the kind of person who looks at theory, collects data, and then looks at the theory again, and tries to figure out how we can use that in our businesses. Customer centricity is something that's really become a bit of a buzzword. And as you always do when you first want to learn about a topic, you typically go to Google. So a couple of weeks ago, I Googled customer centricity, and there's about 600,000 entries in customer centricity on Google. This compares to about 6 million entries on Google when you enter segmentation. Segmentation is a tool that gets used for customer centricity, but customer centricity itself is sort of a burgeoning buzzword, something that's starting to grow. So, what is customer centricity? The old adage that customers are always right is probably how people used to think about customer centricity, but the focus now is not so much on customers being right all the time and delivering an experience that delights customers, but actually just getting the basics right. So if you actually look at some of the definitions for customer centricity, there are things around giving an experience that customers need as opposed to the experience that customers say they want. There's a subtle difference there, which I'll talk a little bit more about as I go through these slides. One of the reasons it's really important to take this customer-centric view, to really put the customers at the center of your thinking, is if you actually look across a lot of industries, the weight that people put on the products that an organization offers accounts for about 40% of their choice. So when they're actually buying, recommending, investing in, or deciding to work for an organization, the actual products itself, only 40%. 60% of their decision-making around organizations have to do with other things. In banking, and this is an example of some of the work that I'm doing at ME Bank, we actually see that pattern come through quite clearly. 39%, when people are choosing a main bank, 39% of their choice is driven by the products on offer. 60%, or in this case 61%, are other things of the offer that a bank has. We can break those down further into fair deal, security, customer service, convenience, and network. So the actual offer beyond just the product alone. This is important because, as we learned yesterday in the behavioral economics session, people think differently about their finances. They have fears, concerns, aspirations about their finances, and if you actually understand what those are and how you can deliver them, you're going to have a better, more loyal customer base. So really that brings us to what are the core elements of customer centricity. One of the things that's really important is, if you ask a customer what they want, they often say the best product for the cheapest price. It's not a sustainable business model to offer the best product for the cheapest price. So really what you want to do is build profitable relationships that customers value more than just cost alone. And how you do that is by understanding what they need. So thinking back to that previous slide, understanding what you have to deliver beyond just the product and the price. One of the things we did to set the tone for today was a short survey, an omnibus survey, that Colmar Brunton helped us with to actually ask people, what do you expect if you wanted to have a great customer experience? What would you expect to get from a service provider? And what you can see is that it really breaks down into people, responsiveness, and some kind of customer service tailoring and convenience. I think what's quite striking is that knowledgeable and friendly staff are quite high, as are that idea of being convenient and responsive. One of the things we also wanted to do was actually understand, from your perspective, if you think your fund delivers on those types of attributes. So if everyone can take out their phones. The question is, how many of these aspects do you think that your fund delivers on? And you can just text in your answer as option 1, if you think you deliver on all of them. Option 2, if you think you deliver on most of them. Option 3, if you think you deliver on about half of them. Option 4, if you only deliver a few of them. And option 5, if you don't think you actually deliver on any of them. I'll sort of let you know as well, we actually asked consumers to tell us what they thought of their super funds. So it'll be interesting to see how your answers match up with what consumers think and your customers or members think. So 51%, so everyone in the room, you sort of figure you deliver on most of them. 3% of people said, no, we don't do any of that. So in a couple of slides, you'll see what consumers think. And I'll warn you now that the answers are quite different. One of the things, and I do feel I need to apologize to my fellow panelists for this slide. It was not a setup. This is actually what consumers told us. We said, if you could rank, based on the customer experience you have with your bank, telco, internet service provider, an airline, your super fund, your fitness club, public transport and energy, who gives you the best customer experience? Banks, this surprised me. I work at a bank now. I used to work at super funds. It really surprised me that banks came out on top. Super funds, you can see, come out in the middle. And unfortunately for Michael and Kane, energy companies and fitness centres come out near the bottom of the list. And that's one of the reasons I'd actually invited them to be on the panel, because I sort of thought that they might have some challenges that they could share with us and some learnings we could take away. So now, how do people feel about what they get from their super fund? So remember, you said you delivered 3% of you said that you delivered on none of those things. Consumers, 33% of consumers think that you deliver on none of them, which I think is sort of the stark reality of the relationship or the experience that a superannuation member has with their fund. One of the things I guess that's pleasing is that at the top, some of the staff, friendly and knowledgeable staff, come up near the top. Convenience, it makes it easy for me to contact them, is really about the operating hours of your contact centre. I think more worrying are some of the things that are at the bottom of the list. So when we sat through the behavioural economics session yesterday, there was a lot of reference to how you build engagement and how you build confidence, particularly with disengaged members. And at the bottom of the list, we have things like proactively offers advice on the right product, listens and responds to my feedback, or offers multiple points of contact. So, I really just wanted to put these results up there to sort of trigger people to start thinking about what they might want to consider doing differently to deliver a great member experience. And, we can always sort of say, well, people aren't engaged with super. Are those results surprising? People don't pay that much attention to super. But at the end of the day, and this sort of mirrors the results they showed yesterday, about a third of people say that they are engaged with super. So obviously you want to deliver a great experience to them, but what about the other 2/3 of people? Why not turn it on its head and think about how do we deliver an experience that's engaging and great for those people? Because on the rare occasions that they do interact with you, don't you want it to be a good experience? And I guess this goes back to then, how do you actually think about the customer or the member? What do you have to do within your organizations to put the customer or the member at the center of everything? This is a basic consumer decision journey that starts when a customer or a member has an initial need. They recognize that they need a product. In superannuation, this is usually they change jobs. They have to make a decision about their super fund. They may or may not actively evaluate different options. Moment of purchase, they join the fund, and then they have a post-purchase experience. They get statements, they get PDSs, they get information from the fund about their super. And ideally what you want to do is then build through a loyalty loop. So the next time that person changes jobs, they take you with them. The bits in orange around this cycle are the things that the stages of the consumer journey that you can affect. You can build awareness of your brand. You can ensure that the customer considers you. You can inspire action, inspire them to join you, to take you with them when they change jobs. You can onboard them in an effective and efficient way in their channel of choice. You can welcome them into the fund so that they know what they should be doing with their super. And then there's obviously the day-to-day servicing, transaction, and engaging. So these are just some of the ideas that you really want to be thinking about if you're looking at the member journey from start to end. So I'll end with 3 considerations before we move on to a bit of a Q&A. What consumers say they want isn't always what they need. So they will tell you that they want the best returns for the cheapest price, but a lot of times they need more than that. They need to understand how and what they should be doing with their super. It's not just about the product and the price or the returns, it's about the experience. And as I said before, the most loyal members are going to be those ones who have a good experience every time they deal with you. And I guess one thing to think about for superannuation is, are you getting the basics right? We work in an industry where there's a lot of legislation about what you should and shouldn't say to members. So, what is the member experience when they open a PDS and they don't understand it? What's the member experience day to day if they need to call you and get stuck in an IVR cycle and can't get through to a real person? That happens with my super fund. I phoned the fund one day and I could not get past the IVR to talk to a real person. That was not a great experience. How does it feel to see your super balance go backwards? And what are the things that funds can be doing to mitigate those things from happening? On the other hand, you think about, well, what can you bring favorably to the table? What's it like to be remembered? What's it like to get a piece of advice or information or help from your super fund that's tailored to you? What's it like to see a case study that is relevant to you as a super fund member? What's it like to be confident that the answers you get to queries from your super fund are consistent and the same every time you call? And I guess those are some of the things that we need to think about in delivering a great customer experience to our members.
I'm interested in picking up on some of the voting responses. There was 43% that were either, doing half of the stuff that your research showed. So I guess a question to the panel is, for those that either want to start or ramp up their customer-centricity programs, and looking at the quality of your research you've got there, Angela, the disciplines and commitment around it, I'd imagine would come at a big cost. And I'd be interested to know how you guys justify the focus and related investment to your respective executives and CEOs and boards, and what are some of the big roadblocks you've faced in championing customer discipline? So maybe I might start with you, Michael.
Sure. So I think the first part of that question around how did we convince the business, the board, to commit and invest appropriately in being customer-centric. It sounds very simple, but we had to build a burning platform for change. We were an industry that, you go back 15 years, were government-owned monopolies. It was easy to look at, and you could get away with looking at customers as meter points that consumed energy and were billed, and they had no choice to go anywhere else. So there wasn't much of a driver there to provide great experiences and service. So we, when competition opened in the industry, suddenly found ourselves in fairly crowded competitive markets, and Victoria very quickly became the highest churning energy market in the world and still is today. So we suddenly had this problem of how do we keep our customers. I think the perception was that the majority of churn was based on price, and cost alone was what consumers were chasing. So when we put all of that together, we intuitively knew that there had to be more to it than just price and cost. Not every consumer's the same. So we did a deep dive into what the root drivers of customer churn were, and surprisingly, price was absolutely a factor in there, but there were a lot more things in there that we weren't doing well that we had to retain our customers. So I guess we put all of that together to the board and basically built that burning platform for change, and it was really, do we continue to compete on price alone and be the same as everyone else and ignore sort of what's really going on with our customers, or do we take a different tact and invest in understanding them, developing broad propositions that meet their needs and creating better experiences for our customers.
Okay, how about you, Angela, with your experience at the bank?
At the bank, so my role at the bank is fairly new, and one of the things that I've come in to do is, when I first started at the bank, I said I want to change the language from we think our customers to we know our customers. And similar to Michael, it was around really understanding what drives our customers. At the end of the day, everyone, you always rationalize, well, in financial services it's about money. It's a very rational thing. But when we do, so we sat down and looked at an analysis and said, well, how important is the price factor compared to other factors? And just demonstrating that sort of 60-40 rule really starts bringing it home to the wider executive and the board that we do have to compete more on just price alone. And I think that's a challenge in financial services because it doesn't intuitively make sense. But more and more, if you actually start digging into how people behave, they behave in a way that is more than just price alone. If it was just price alone, we wouldn't have legislated MySuper.
Yeah, okay. A good point. I want to pick up on one of the bullet points you had on one of your slides, and it was what consumers say they want isn't always what they need. And that reminds me of one of my favourite quotes by Henry Ford that says, if I asked them what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. I'd be interested to know from the panel, maybe starting with you, Kane, what processes do your organisation use to listen to your customers, and how do you ensure that you're not getting misled into creating or designing products and services that are going to fail? And is there an opportunity to co-create products with your customers?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think first and foremost, we do as much watching, probably more watching than we do listening. So we like to think that when we get to a point where customers are coming to us for something, we've got some data on why that might be, or the trends. And I'm largely going to tell you what you would already know here, but to be following daily reports, monthly reports, whatever that might be, tracking of customers changing products, we'd hope that we get to a point where we're probably across those decisions before we would need customers to come to us with that. In a lot of ways, we work largely in a different industry, and the three industries I've worked in, a not-for-profit health and fitness, a racing club, and now a football club. We obviously have different objectives. But in answer to the final point, would we work with customers? Absolutely. And I think there's some great examples, across many industries where customer feedback has driven great decisions. So certainly we listen, but I'd like to think we do as much watching as listening. Okay.
How about you, Michael? Any thoughts on the question?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I absolutely love the point as well. And I think at the heart of it, we very rarely ask customers what they need and what they want. And I guess let me expand on that because it sounds fairly insular. We really spend our time understanding customers, their lifestyles, the household makeup, the behaviours within those households, what the pain points are in relation to their interactions with our industry, what they need to achieve, and what they're really, ultimately trying to achieve in dealing with us. By looking broadly at those types of things through things like psychographic segmentation, pulling insight from customer attitudes to service monitoring, brand monitoring, or bespoke research into sort of key points in the life cycle, like moving home or something like that, we're usually able to pull together a very good view of what customers actually need. And it's not always what, if you set someone down and said, what are you after? It's not always what they would tell you. So I think the effort put in understanding that and trying to determine what they really need is more powerful than actually asking the question. And that enables us to then develop solutions that we think meet those needs. And I think that's where co-creation comes in. It's at that point you can put in front of a customer in the right context a product or a proposition or a service promise, and you can really test then if it actually meets the needs, and I think co-creation comes in there in terms of shaping the final sort of output.
Okay, we're starting to get some questions through on the screen, and I might jump around a bit. There's a really good question here and I might pass it to you, Angela, if that's okay. How much do you believe customer perceptions of service are a result of expectation management, and have the banks really done a better job of educating consumers?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's certainly in line with the thoughts that I had when I saw the results of the survey we did. The banks recently have spent a phenomenal amount of time pushing customer service and customer experience to the forefront of what they're doing. So I'll probably see in the CBA campaign with Tony Collette, the turning cant into can, the Westpac one from last year around this is your bank manager, really personalising stuff. So I think in the NAB breakup campaign, and I think the thing is at the moment those seem to just be marketing campaigns, because if you actually look at the customer experience that some of the big four banks offer, CBA is probably the furthest ahead, but the other ones, you know, there's a lot of cynicism certainly in the marketplace amongst banking professionals that at the moment they're just marketing campaigns. So it'll be interesting to see if those perceptions of banks as delivering great customer experience continue beyond the end of the marketing campaigns.
I guess, Umberto, if I could just jump in there, because I think expectation meeting experience is a really critical point. And I can't reference the research right at this point, but there has been research done which highlighted Aldi as the most successful brand where expectation met experience, right, because people were qualified as to what to expect. You go into Aldi, you're going to get cheap prices and you're going to get a lot of something and not much variety, and you're probably going to have to put stuff in the bags for yourself, but you're going in there because it's cheap, and they don't profess to be anything but that. And for where expectation met experience, they were ranked 1. And I think it's a really important point that it's super critical that you set that expectation.
Absolutely. I think it goes to the basic tenet of branding when, you know, as you say, Angela, you know, your brand position and your brand promise has to be more than just a marketing and advertising campaign. It has to be the way the organisation operates and lives up to that promise. And to that question of building more than just an advertising campaign, it goes to the heart of the organisational culture. And we've got a really good question on the screen here, which is, how do you change your team culture to support a customer-centric strategy? And when you think about the genesis of industry funds, you know, we've started with very small operations, very product-focused or product-centric type of activities. What experiences have you guys had in trying to build the culture at an organisation, be more focused around the customer?
I can probably relate to that extremely well, given where the energy industry has come from. I think absolutely it's been one of the key challenges of our business to overcome a culture of, you know, this is the way we've always done things, and this is the way the industry works. And, you know, it's fair to say we do have a very tight regulatory, or we have 4 very tight regulatory frameworks, one per market, that force us to do things in certain ways, and that, you know, obviously influences behaviour and culture within an organisation. I think how we've overcome that over time, and it won't happen quickly, it's absolutely a journey, is to ensure that you set a very clear vision early on. And I think when we started gaining momentum and board support for customer centricity and investing in things like greater insights and research segmentation, and creating actual customer experience rather than just, you know, servicing customers, I think when people start to see those things happening from the top and a very clear vision that they can align behind, you start to get shift the inertia, I guess. That said, we still today, when you sort of go deep into operations and those types of things, come up against barriers, and I wish there was one single sort of panacea for that, and I don't think there is. But,
I'd say it absolutely starts from the top down, and our CEO, Brendan Gale, some of you may know, is extremely customer-centric. And I'll refer back to a point back in 2009. Each year the AFL do some service rankings across the club with a variety of different questions. And in 2009, our members were asked the question, when you have a problem and you need to go to the club, how do you rank them? 0 being abysmal, 10 being outstanding. We ranked a 3.6. It was pretty low. And for anyone who supports Richmond or knows the AFL, we probably had a history of bunkering down when things weren't going well, and we spent a lot of time bunkered down back in the early 2000s. And Brendan really brought out the attitude, well, that's not how we want to be. If things are going wrong, we need to deal with them at the time, overcome whatever objectives we need to. And he certainly supported additional resources into our team, and we now have a bit of a philosophy that irrespective of what the question or the query or the problem might be, we'll respond to it. And in an AFL environment, a dynamic environment where you've got a game each week, that's incredibly challenging. 3 years later, in 2012, on the same survey, when the same question was asked, Richmond rated an 8.6. Not only was it the highest score last year, it was the highest score ever recorded. So it certainly highlighted that it can be done, but it starts at the top down, and probably goes back to the first point. It does take, in some instances, some resources, because it takes people there to answer those questions and deal with those issues.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. Kane, staying on you, we were speaking at breakfast this morning, and you had a great example as to how different organisations tackled the exact same customer problem around inactive members in the leisure industry in 2 very different ways. And that got me thinking about the super industries and the strategies by funds to reactivate inactive members, particularly in the lead up to some major super reform. Are you able to share with us your example and why your organisation chose a specific path and any resultant outcomes as a lesson for us in super?
Yeah, sure. So going back, I spent 13 years with the Victorian YMCA, where we managed health and fitness centres. We managed them on behalf of local government. So anyone from Victoria who might be familiar with the Ascot Vale, Brunswick, Kidinia, Casey, those huge fitness facilities, they were facilities that we ran. And we had competitors out in the marketplace who certainly weren't not-for-profit. They were profit-driven companies, and without mentioning any names, you may have noticed a particular organisation who managed to get themselves on 60 Minutes and a Current Affair fairly regularly for putting people on 2 and 3 year contracts and direct debit contracts that they were always going to find it difficult to fulfil, and had stopped going and had continued to debit, and then had tried to take them to court. And in reality, that was what their brand stood for. It was a profit-driven, we're not overly concerned about the customer brand. To their credit, they lived it. We were quite different, and the way we dealt with our members who weren't attending is we had a very structured process that we would try and make contact with them. At a certain point, we would call them, and if it got to the stage at 180 days that we couldn't get in contact with these members, we'd simply stop debiting them and leave notes on their accounts saying if they do come back or when they're ready to come back, restart them, no join fee, make it as easy as possible for them. And that was in stark contrast to our competitor, and I suppose I'm trying not to criticise them because that's what their brand stood for. But I think it's really important that if you're going to make a brand statement, and it goes back to your point, Umberto, that you've got to be prepared to live and die by that statement. And even more recently, I was lucky enough towards the end of last year to do a 5-day business excellence course over at the Disney Institute in Orlando, Florida. And anyone who ever gets the chance to do this course, I'd highly recommend it. But one of the days focused on brand, and they spoke about the Disney brand, and it was often what they chose not to do as much as what they chose to do for their brand. And a couple of examples I'll relay were when they bought the cruise ship operation. Traditionally, one of the biggest and most passive revenue streams on a cruise ship was the gambling, and they made a decision, we're not going to gamble. We know it's going to cost us money, but it's not what our brand stands for. So they chose not to do it. And another interesting point, I don't know if you've ever been to Disney World, but if you have a T-shirt with, say, alcohol or cigarette branding or a brand that doesn't line up with Disney's brand and you want a photo with Mickey will actually turn you on your side and the shop will be back to back with Mickey. So there's no branding. They don't want any of that type of branding associated with them. So it just goes to shows the extreme that a company like Disney will go to protect their brand and live it out in everything they do.
Fantastic. There's another really good question that I might throw to you, Angela, and I'll move to you, Michael, because I've got a related question. But the question here is the focus on customer centricity more important than competitor analysis, or do they work in conjunction?
They have to work in conjunction. At ME Bank, we use a framework that we call Ask, Observe, Act. Ask customers what they need, observe their behaviour, to understand what you have to do, how you should act to improve the customer experience. And under the observe bit is where we kind of fit in competitor analysis, because we need to know what our competitors are doing and in a way understand, can we potentially leapfrog them? Do we do a copycat? Do we do the same as them? Or are we able to actually do better than our competitors? So you have to look at it in comparison. And I think the important thing to keep in mind is that the experience that customers are having across all categories, not just your direct competitors in your category, is influencing their expectations. So people have phenomenal power with their mobile phones now to use comparison sites. The experience they have as a shopper at Amazon is going to influence their expectations of how they deal with other organizations. So you really have to be having that market view to understand what you should be doing and how you should be adapting to deliver a good customer experience.
So in the context of working in conjunction, your customer centricity focus and compare analysis, Michael, you talked about how you built the case internally at AGL, how over time the culture started moving from a product or very low interest categories, almost public service type mentality, to a customer centric focus. And earlier this morning, and I hope I'm not putting you on the spot here, but you spoke about the way you guys are looking to shift away from competitors, so taking the knowledge from what you've learnt from customers and the intelligence, what's that led you to do from a competitive angle in the benefit of the customers and arguably at the cost of the organisation and its profits. So are you at liberty to talk about some of the big competitive moves AGL is making in that regard?
Yeah, certainly. I think probably the biggest and sort of boldest move we've taken in the last month has been to withdraw from using door knocking as a channel to market. It's been a key driver of success for all energy retailers since competition's been introduced, and it's absolutely played a role in taking value to consumers and providing choice to them when they're not necessarily predisposed to going out and searching for it. So it's absolutely played a role there, and it's actually created some of the highest churning markets in the world in Australia. What we've seen over time, though, is that consumer sentiment has absolutely, as the market's become more crowded, moved away from or move against that channel. And fairly scarily, last year we sort of got to a point where we saw that the majority of energy decision makers were actually negative about the channel. Probably the thing that not surprised us, but that motivated us to take action was that 6% of people that had experienced a door knocking approach from anyone in the market, only 6% saw that as a positive experience. And we sat back and said, is this really where we want to be as a player? I think we very much see ourselves as leaders as well, and when we put all of that together, it was pretty clear that we wanted to look at exiting the channel. So intuitively we knew it was the right thing to do. I think rationally, and you look at sort of business casing and how you sell to your CFO and those types of things, all of the short-term risks were very tangible. So there would be an impact to sales volumes. It could impact our growth and those types of things. And really all of the benefits were fairly intangible. Brand perception and experience and those types of things. Sometimes hard to convince a CEO of the benefit and the power of them and get them to believe some fairly bold assumptions around that. So what we ended up doing is trialling or piloting in a removal in 2 markets and monitoring what went on there, asking our customers how that had changed their perception and those types of things, and through that we built the confidence to be able to withdraw completely last month. So
fantastic. I mean, you know, and the reason I asked that question, and thank you for sharing that particular example, is because as the super industry moves into an era of my super where pretty much we're all going to look the same, you know, that example struck me as one of having a lot of managerial courage and conviction to try something that's going to be distinctive in the best interest of members, but not always, you know, I guess from the financial side, you know, in the best interest of, you know, your shareholders and all the rest of it. So, but I think, you know, the long-term pain for the long-term gain, I think is a real quality in leading organisations to be able to take those hard decisions at time in the best interest of members. So thanks for sharing that one. Angela, I've got a question for you in terms of, you know, in this day and age, in this era of big data, how important do you think it is for organisations to ramp up their data intelligence to assist with designing better customer experience? And do you believe that, you know, the management of big data is going to be the differentiator for a lot of organisations in terms of customer engagement strategies?
I have to confess I'm a little bit cynical about big data, only because I think it's another buzzword, and I think organisations don't even know what to do with small data. So if you don't know the basics of how to use the data that you have, how do you leapfrog to big data? You know, I think why we're in a position where big data has become the buzzword is because it's now cheaper to keep data than it is to actually keep data and store data than it is to actually understand what data you need and what data you can purge. So I think, you know, the first step has to be setting strategy and asking the right questions, understanding what you want to deliver to your customer base, what they need, and then using that to inform your data strategy. Big data in itself, you know, if you can do that well, that will set you well on the path to using to the big data, the nirvana. But you have to know what your customers want and need first. You know, that's where you have to start.
With fitness clubs and football clubs, I'm sure you've got a lot of member data. Is there anything unique you could share with us in your world that you think we could benefit from in super funds in the way you approach data and analyse data?
I think one of the original points I made was about, and it probably highlights Angela's point about what you're asking for and actually understanding data rather than coming to a point or a fork in the road. We need to pull all this data to make a big decision. I think it's very valuable in the business I work in to understand that moving along every day. In terms of data and something a little bit different that we've done recently, we've actually brought a demographer on at Richmond about 18 months ago. We're really interested in developing up a secondary market, and we've had a bit of a crack at it before, and for a couple of reasons we didn't quite get it right. So we actually brought a demographer on to come in and actually assess where our best opportunities lie based on an existing supporter base, based on migration trends into that particular area. So are people moving into that area, or do they have a propensity to support Richmond? And are they the right people? Other secondary markets we looked at, a lot of the migration was out of other areas and was middle-age migration. And then there's some areas of Melbourne which is very much about babies and juniors being born, and they're obviously areas we want to be in. So in terms of how we're using that information right now, we're developing up a strategy in terms of a secondary market, and the strategy has a lot of data sitting behind it to ensure that where we go, we get one good crack at it, and we absolutely get the best bang for our buck.
Fantastic. All right, I've got a question, and before I ask this question, I just want to declare I am not an expert in call centres. And I just want to declare that because I don't want to offend any of my professional colleagues in the room. But one thing I could never come to terms with, and I open this up to the panel, is that a common consumer channel we use where many customer experiences are formed is actually in a call centre or through a call centre contact. Really good call centres, and when you see awards being awarded around the best contact centre, they maintain precise data intelligence record on things like the time, length, composition, type of call, you name it. But it strikes me that many call centre metrics are focused on dimensions of efficiency. For this reason, do you believe call centre service standards are the enemy of achieving great customer experiences on that basis? Do you have a view on that?
I might start over that side.
Okay. I think it makes it more challenging. You know, one of I know one of the funds has had an experience where they were reviewing the operations in the call centre and decided to turn off the screens. So, you know, if you walk into most call centres, there's the big screens there that have average handling time and all the metrics around that the operators are expected to live by, live and breathe by, really. And they found over time that, you know, there was this initial panic. What's that going to mean for average handling time? Is it going to blow out? Are we going to become less efficient? But it actually improved the customer experience without really blowing out those metrics, because it was very much around the focus on, on delivering to the customer. And there was a question that scrolled up a little while ago from the audience about how do you build the culture of customer centricity within your organisations? And that would be a perfect bottom-up type example of trial that, see what happens. You know, if you arm your call centre staff with the power to actually deliver that customer experience without always being focused on average handling time and some of the other metrics that are so common, you know, it could actually work in that non-intuitive way where you do deliver a better customer experience, and it actually becomes more efficient for your call centre as well, because customers are getting their issues dealt with the first time. They don't have to keep calling back. So you're actually avoiding the follow-up issues that can happen.
Okay, anyone want to add to that, Michael?
I guess just quickly, I take a fairly moderate view, and I'll declare I'm not by any means a call centre expert either. But I think you've got to strike the right balance, and I think being too far towards the measures of efficiency and time and those types of things absolutely are the enemy of good customer experiences. And there's a point in when I started at AGL, I sat down and listened to a stream of movers calls, and the agent picked up the phone quickly. They had a smile on their voice. The service level was great. The customer asked to be disconnected the following Friday because they were moving home. The agent did it quickly, confirmed where the last bill was going to be sent, said thanks very much for your call, and hung up. And they were chuffed. They'd had a perfect call, did exactly what they were asked to do, did it within their AHT, and moved on to the next call. And I sat there horrified because that customer then had to either, best case, go away and contact us to reconnect at the property they were about to move into, or worst case, likely call one of our competitors and connect with them. So I think about how can you identify some of those dumb things or those obvious things that too much focus on metrics can drive. And to be fair, when you're asked to operate within a framework of metrics, it's easy to sort of just think along those lines and not sort of pull up and see the bigger picture.